Welcome to I Have Something to Say, where unfiltered opinions meet raw authenticity. If you're tired of the same old canned answers and crave genuine conversations about real issues, then you've landed in the right spot. So buckle up for a roller coaster of diverse perspectives. Yours truly, Samí Haiman-Marrero, and my co-host, Chris Majocha, will dive headfirst into topics that impact our daily lives. From the boardrooms to the streets, get ready to hear real people cut through the BS and deliver the discussions you've been waiting for. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of I Have Something to Say. I'm Samí Haiman-Marrero. I'm here with my co-host, Chris Majocha, and we've invited our dear friend, Deloria Nelson. She's the founder, and CEO of ACE Solutions, a dear friend and community leader, really, and a champion for equity. And I've been following you like forever. And I always admire your pause, right? When you're facing, challenging situations and you're helping people also navigate those. But also your pause in reacting, right, to different situations, because you're very mindful, right, of how you address the good, the bad, and the ugly that we find in society. But in the last 3 weeks, you've been very, very vocal, right? Which to me was like, yeah, I totally agree with what she's saying. And I really admired the way also that you described it, right? Because I've been struggling with this too in the last couple of weeks, right? And it's like, we're going through so much as a nation, and then we're experiencing these highs, right? It's like, whoa, unexpected highs, right? And then we're also experiencing like these lows, and I feel that in just a couple of, like the last couple of weeks, it's been, like the epitome of that, of like the high, and the lows, right? Are the murder of Sonya Massey, right? And then, of course, the nomination of Kamala Harris, right? And so I know, and so the way you describe it, navigating these feelings as a collective really is like emotional whiplash. And I loved how you described it because it's a really poignant but also very descriptive way of that sensation, right, of that pulling, right, and that tug of war that we're all experiencing. All that, a lot of us, not everybody, because not everybody cares, right, but that a lot of us are experiencing in our hearts, right, and in our gut. It's like that icky but then exhilarating feeling as well. And so I want to thank you for making time, to have this conversation together, about and try to process, right? And figure out and wrap our heads around, especially the lows, right? Because and so, how, like, where did you come up with that term, right? Emotional whiplash.
I think it's just how I felt. Like, so I remember at least the order that I was exposed to what was happening was I think it was July 21st when President Biden decided that he wasn't going to go for reelection, and for lack of a better term, passed the baton of Vice President Kamala Harris. And so you're excited, disappointed, scared, wondering, is the nation really ready?
Mm-hmm.
But immediately a sense of possibility. I guess that's how I describe it. Like, okay, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was on the call. They had a call like the Sunday after. It was like when Black women vote, or it was some big call, and it ended up they had to keep refreshing it because it kept breaking. Because first they said 3,000, then they changed to 1520. It ended up being 40,000 women on the call.
I know, I was one of them.
Yeah. It was like, it was so cool. And you could feel the energy and the positivity and the possibility. And then you start thinking, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
think we can do this. And then
Mm-hmm.
as you started hearing others being as excited, others from different groups. Now they have white women for Kamala, Hispanics for Kamala, black men, white men. I mean, it's just Republicans for Kamala. So you start going, okay, we're evolving as a nation. Yeah, this could really happen. And then I think it was like 2 days later, I saw a replay on TV of the murder of Sonya Massey. And it was so confusing. I will admit, I don't think I really processed it because I saw it and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, what happened? I mean, it didn't make any sense to me. I see them talking to the woman. She's, seeming cooperative, pleasant. And the next thing you know, and I was like, what is this? So I'll be honest, I looked at it, but I didn't process it. Now, one of the things I know about myself and most people is denial really is a tool.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we cannot face all of the trauma that is happening at one point. And so our bodies can really be in denial or kind of let something pass and not really absorb it
Mm-hmm.
until we're ready. So I would say the first time I saw it, I really didn't get it. I think I saw it a second time and I was kind of perplexed. And then the next day, we had the nonprofit side of Black Boardroom Leadership Institute where we do a session. And it's like the executive CEOs or the executive directors and the board chairs.
Mm-hmm.
And quite frankly, it's more majority white.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still processing it. So I was still processing it. I had to go the whole day. We do a full day session. I told my coworker, Michelle, I said, did you hear about it? And she hadn't. So I showed it to her and she was looking like, what is this? And I was still hearing it, seeing it, but not really processing it. And I'll be honest, a lot of times it's hard to process these things in diverse groups
Mm-hmm.
because other people don't share the level of emotion
Mm-hmm.
or the alignment. I mean, they know it's wrong, right? So I'm not saying that people don't know it's wrong, but it feels different than when it feels like it's you. And I felt this way over the years. I remember when there was the murder in the church in Charleston. One of the
Mm-hmm.
people that was there had gone to my college. I didn't know her personally, but and you go to work and everybody's like, oh, da da da, business as usual, and you're mourning, right?
Yeah.
Your insides are like, they used to make a joke, say calling in black, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we want to call in because it's so heavy we don't have to work, but because the majority of people are operating business as usual, you almost feel like you have nowhere to go with it. There's nothing to say or do but just kind of put your head down, and you may talk to a sister, girlfriend, or someone else quietly to kind of get it out. So I didn't
Mm-hmm.
really deal with it that day. So it was the next day I did the video on emotional whiplash and kind of how I was feeling. And
Mm-hmm.
what was really sweet, but I wasn't ready yet. One of the participants who was in the classroom, it happened to be a white lady. She's like, "Oh my God, Dee, we failed you. We should have brought it up, whatever." And I said, "No, it's fine. I really hadn't processed it enough, right? I
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't really ready to deal with it." I said, "So I appreciate, I mean, showing empathy at any point is good, but I just wasn't there yet." And then a couple of days later, so that was probably Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Then that Thursday, we had the leadership side of BBLI. And the leadership side is primarily all Black leaders.
Mm-hmm.
So when I put the day together, the first thing I put up there was a picture of Sonya Massey. And we
Mm-hmm.
all stood up, we held hands and did like a moment of just like silent prayer where we said her name and it just was like a relief. And
Yeah.
everybody kind of got it. I mean, sure, we have people in there that weren't all Black, a couple of the administrators, but they got it and they held hands, and
Mm-hmm.
I needed that, right?
Yeah.
And I think everybody needed that kind of collective side of what is going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, you,
Yeah.
you're trying to celebrate, but then the guilt of a senseless murder and the reality check that there's so much work to do.
Mm-hmm.
It has your emotions all up and down. And it's not the first time I've felt that. And I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of us have. I mean, Sammy, even certain levels of success, when we get to certain levels of success individually, there's a part of us that celebrates, but there's still a part of us that mourns because we know collectively, whether it's our Hispanic sisters and brothers or our Black sisters and brothers or brown or Jewish or Muslim, you realize that it's not equitable, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you may have been picked out and you may have escaped, been promoted, or whatever the word is,
Mm-hmm.
but so many of your people don't still have the opportunities and are left behind. And
Mm-hmm.
so even with what should be successes, you may feel good for a minute. I kind of was thinking about it a little bit. I kind of said I step up, I celebrate, but then I serve, right? Because I have to remember the people behind me.
Mm-hmm.
So even though, I think you should always celebrate successes, I really look forward to collective success, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not bask in being the only one. I mean, being the only one, in all honesty, is not flattering to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been fortunate, and yeah, I think I'm smart, blah, 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 but I'm not the only one. There's so many other D's and Sammys and Chris's who don't get the exposure or the opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's like, okay, what else can I do? And so, you've heard the phrase lift as you climb. So one of
Mm-hmm.
the things I'm always doing is trying to pull other people up, trying to open doors. And that helps a lot. I mean, now I told somebody, I said, I think I'm the auntie now, right? Because everybody goes Miss D or Miss Deloria. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
So
even offend with
TTD, you're TTD. I'm TTD.
D. That's right. I mean, but I'm okay with that because a lot of the people that I've mentored, they're doing really well now, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay. So all of that sacrifice, kicking open doors that I wasn't going to walk through, speaking
Mm-hmm.
truth to power
Mm-hmm.
is helping the next generation. And so you celebrate that, but you still see all of the disparity, the despair, the gaps, and the fact that somebody who was supposed to protect you just basically shot you in cold blood, right?
My
I
God.
said I want to do a post that said of take your chance with the criminals, love Sonya. Now damn.
Oh.
But that's how I feel.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
know that it's not all police. I know that
Mm-hmm.
it's not all law enforcement officers, but at the same time, as a Black woman married to a Black man with two Black sons, and in this case it was a woman. I mean, what do I do? Right? If something is happening, if somebody's having a mental health break, if I hear something, I'm gonna think twice before I call.
Mm-hmm.
I have to. Right? I mean, everybody doesn't have to, but I have to because there's been so many circumstances of mistaken identity or an assumption that the Black person or the Hispanic person is the criminal. And the
Mm-hmm.
criminal could be something else, and they going after me, and then and
Mm-hmm.
so that's horrible, but it's how I feel, right? And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'm fortunate in that I try really hard. Like I appreciate you saying that I pause. I do. I
Mm-hmm.
am very deliberate in reacting and managing my emotions. Some of it comes natural and some of it is because of the work that I do.
Mm-hmm.
When I teach bias training, there's a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. Daniel Kahneman is a psychologist, and he wrote the book, and he talks about bias happens most when we're moving fast, right? Because you got the automatic part of your brain, and then you have the part of your brain where you have to think through things. So that
Mm-hmm.
automatic part of your brain, it goes to the bias.
Mm-hmm.
The slow, more methodical part of your brain can help you kind of think it through and not react. And so I try to use that part of my brain of so I can be fair in conversation, so I can do a real assessment, and so I don't just react. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
it's practiced, it's planned. It doesn't always work, but I will say it works most of the time. But yeah, I know that was a lot of monologue, but it was just
No, it's great. And I got to tell you though, I suppose it's some of the training that these cops should take, quite frankly, because it seems to me that this is could have been avoided
absolutely.
if it wasn't like the reaction wasn't as quick. And I just feel that the whiplash comes because you feel like, wow, we're advancing in this area, but then it's like we're taking a step back in these, or nothing has changed in this, right? So that it's like just a position of those two realities that coexist, right? And they're completely opposite to each other. I got to tell you, I was on a very rare break with family when both things happened too, right? And so, and like you, the announcement, it was like such a high. It was like, oh my God, we were like, scream. It was like crazy, right? That, President Biden stepped down, and that, Vice President Harris was like, endorsed by him. It was like
Right.
so like, oh my God, is this really happening? It's like that sense of joy, like they're saying, right? And then also relief, which are kind of like together, but not really, because one is like, oh, right? It's almost like, oh my God, you're allowed to like be exhausted, right?
Right.
Then you've got the adrenaline running and then that night, when we were staying in an Airbnb, and there were like TVs in each room, and I always sleep with the news on, right? And
This is not good for real rest, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's another episode. But still, so I was watching the news, right? And when it came up, right, because it was already a couple of weeks after,
right?
Because the Sonya Massey had died, right? Was killed like at least 2 weeks prior.
Absolutely.
But they were like now with the body cams and everything, and as I'm watching, like you, I was like, wait, what? Wait, what? What is he talking about? Like the reporter, like introducing the story and giving a recap and talking about, and she's like, and she said something like, please, use caution because this might be, and I'm like,
this could be.
what is going on? As I'm watching and she's doing the voiceover explaining what the hell is going on, and I see, oh my God, and I see the cop. I'm like screaming I'm like, no, like I was like, no, what are you doing? And Scott, my poor husband, was like, what's going on? I'm like, no, and I'm like screaming, and I feel so bad because I was like, oh my God, and I just fucking lost it. I couldn't believe it. She was ducking, and I'm
right? Yeah, you're gonna make me cry. Yeah, it was like it didn't seem real. I
was like, what the hell just happened?
It was, yeah. I still don't know because,
oh my God.
I mean, I understand the potential threat, but come on.
No, come on. This
is a threat. Are you serious?
She was tiny. She was the hunter, right?
Cooperative.
She was cooperative. She was called there for help, and he was like 60 something. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on. No. That it messed me up so bad. I couldn't. It was just bad, right?
And it just seemed like, is anybody safe, right? I mean, if someone could come in your house, you're not being aggressive, you're being cooperative, you're doing exactly what they ask you to do, and they shoot you in cold blood.
Oh my God.
And he said before he did it, I'm going to shoot you in your effing what face?
Yeah.
What kind of monster?
Mm-hmm.
But not monster, demon, because remember, when she said, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus,
she saw right through him. And when later, because that came out later, right? Like the audio, they only had, and when they started transcribing everything, the following week and stuff, I said, no, that there was like a spiritual energy there, and they're and they're tacking it on mental illness. And I'm not saying that she might not have been,
But she
suffering
having a little
from some
mental break.
condition.
Anybody can. But she saw what that was. You know,
You
she
listen,
called out. She called out the demon.
totally. And she was in her bathrobe. You could tell she was preparing probably tea or something. I mean, she was chilling, right? She
Yep.
was concerned because there was a prowler. She felt there was someone outside of her home. You know what I'm saying? And so, yeah. And
And then you let the monster in, right?
yes,
Whatever it was outside was probably less of a threat than what you let inside. Isn't that sad?
yes, yes, it's terrible. It was just horrible, but it's that pull, right, of the emotions, and it's like, okay, so then we mourn, right, and then we rejoice, all in the span of like a half hour or a day,
Yeah.
and at these really elevated, right, levels, and so it's a lot. It really is.
It's a lot.
It's
It's a
exhausting.
lot. It's
Yeah,
exhausting. They talk about racial trauma, and then you talk about not watching it over and over because when you do, you trigger yourself over and over. And
yeah,
so I have some friends that's like, no, I'm not going to watch it. I'm like, don't.
yeah,
Uh, I felt like I needed to see it because you you can't understand how senseless it was until you watched it, right?
yeah,
If someone described it to you, you'd be like, yeah, no, something maybe, before body cams. I mean, that's the other thing. Think about all of the horrible, horrific things that have happened all these years without anybody noticing. And in this case, this person, I'm not even going to say gentleman or officer, turned off his body cam, right? It was his partner's body cam. And he didn't turn it back on until after. And when you start hearing the tapes and the stuff that he said when they were trying to get help, he's like, "Oh, I shot in the head." I mean, it was
yeah, yeah,
horrible,
yes, complete.
horrible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it makes you, like you said, 5 steps forward, 10 steps back. I think, though, in some ways, it's a reality check of all the work we still have to do. But the juxtaposition of, the possibility of a President Harris and the murder of Sonya Massey that close together, I
Mm-hmm.
think is the reality of all the work that we still need to do in this country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
I
we
don't
have
want
to,
to
oh no, go ahead, Chris.
sugarcoat this or take away from. I think in just taking this from. So I will admit I've been paying attention to the news enough to pay attention, but I think emotional whiplash, as you mentioned, I've been finding myself unplugging quite a bit more just for my own
Healthy.
mental health. And when I think of these extremes that we're talking about, and with Biden stepping down, at first I was like, all right, so what the hell does that mean? And then understand that Kamala was gonna take the place, and I was like, okay, actually, I feel like this could be a good energy, a good movement, something that people can rally behind. And then everything with the murder of Sonya Massey, just taking it from like I chant and do like meditations and stuff all the time, and when I think of whether you're talking about from like a religious context of like Christianity, of like God will not give you a problem that you are not strong enough to handle, or in Buddhism it's
I often
walking.
question him. I'm like, God, do you see this backpack of bricks?
Exactly.
I know what that scripture says, but do you see me bent over? Because he and I have real conversations. I'm like, okay,
Oh,
now.
absolutely. And then in Buddhism, there's there's like the yin and the yang,
Yep.
walking the middle path, but basically that there is the understanding that there is no good without bad, there is no bad without good, and that there is always an equal and opposite
Yeah.
situation. And I think you said it very poignantly of, I think we're in a situation where it wakes people up. It tells people like, hey, there is still a major problem here.
Right.
And now all of a sudden we've been presented, in the midst of this tragedy, an opportunity to get behind actual change. And who better to, be a voice for a Black woman who was killed than a Black woman as a president, or a woman of color just in general. And I think in a way, it is emotionally triggering, but perhaps the catalyst, and I hate to say, is like perhaps the catalyst that was needed to get people to say, like, all right, what can I do? I need to do something, because it's that emotional visceral experience that tells somebody, like, I need to act. I don't know what to
Right.
do, but I need to act. And
Mhm.
hopefully, we are getting provided leadership, or opportunities to back leadership that is capable of, I'm not going to say, fixing everything, but
But
getting us
addressing
to
it at
a
least with some empathy and as
exactly.
opposed to ignorance. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think our consciousness has to be pricked, and I hate to say it, almost regularly, because I think, first of all, I think a lot of us have become desensitized, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we've almost had to. If we react to every trauma, every injustice, every inequity, we would literally be balled up in a fetal position, not able to function, right? There is
Mm-hmm.
just so much going on. And
Mm-hmm.
so our body's ability to desensitize certain things so we can keep going, it's helpful, but it's also injurious, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's helpful because it allows us to function, but it's injurious because then sometimes the world doesn't respond without a strong reaction, right? And so I think about the George Floyd situation, and as tragic as that was, and I don't know if there are degrees of horrificness, but
Mm-hmm.
this one was, it's like, but I think we get our consciousness pricked. We kind of say, no, no, this won't work. Black Lives Matter, people. And then a couple years pass and we kind of get lulled into this sense of security. We are the world. Everything is
Mm-hmm.
good. And then something else happens to remind us that we still got a lot of work to do, right?
Yeah.
And so to your point, I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's the contrast effect that makes it so much more real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a good
Yeah.
point,
And
Henry.
then and I think, just to add on to it, and you both have touched on this as well, but um, obviously not everybody understands the experience of a person of color, a woman of color, specifically, in this instance, but the idea of being violated in your own home, the
Yeah,
place that is supposed to be your domain, your safe
yeah,
place, that is, I think, an emotion that, regardless of race, color, creed, political background, that is something that you react to. I mean,
oh, absolutely.
I
Yeah,
have a wife, I have a daughter, in my home. I mean, to me, that, they are, not women of color, but they are everything to me. And to
absolutely.
feel like the safe space that I try to contribute to and try to provide is, potentially not a safe space, then again, to me, even as a white male, the person who, statistically should care about this the least, am motivated, in a deeper level. I mean, I obviously care, genuinely, besides the home aspect, but it adds another layer of,
Sure.
like I
Mm-hmm.
can feel that too. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
So
that's your safe space, right? Your home
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
is your abode, and just the fact that the person that's supposed to protect you is
Mm-hmm.
the person that violates you, that just, it's so confusing. It's like that, what, the upside down house off of International Drive. It's like, what?
Mm-hmm.
This is
Mm-hmm.
crazy stuff. It defies reason, and it makes it really hard to process.
Yeah. And you know what? That's a good point, right? When you think about your home, regardless of anything, strip everything else away,
Hmm.
right? You want to think that for the average person, right? If you're calling someone into your sacred space, right? The space that you are supposed to be most secure in, right? Especially if it's also a protector, right? Someone that is a hero, that's supposed to be a champion for safety, right?
Yeah.
It's really the place where I feel that if you have some sense of humanity, right, that you can step into empathy right there, right? Like, whether you're single, whether you have a family, whether you're a cat lady, whether you're, right, and I'm going there, right? Yeah, and so, and that's basic, even the cop, right?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. No, home is supposed to be sacred, regardless of what the home is. If it's if it's a car, if it's a 200 square, home is just where you feel
Mhm.
the most protected and where you can exhale. And this is like my little piece of heaven, for lack of a better
Mhm.
description. And when it's
Yes.
violated, it's like, whoa.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so I think the resolution, right? I think justice has already been started to be served.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, in the case of Sonya Massey,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's already, in
It's in progress, right? I don't think
yeah.
this is not one of the ones that he'll get away with. It's
No, I don't
somewhere
think so.
people are
And I
like,
think he has a history too, right?
he
So
does.
I feel
Mhm.
like in a lot of ways this was preventable,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
so that's a whole other discussion,
Mhm.
right? But when we talk about this whiplash of emotion, this emotional whiplash, right?
Yeah.
It's again, and I like how they're doing it with the campaign. I'm gonna go there too because it is what it is. We're going for mi comadre Kamala all the way. And with her running mate now, Tim
Yeah.
Walz, with every
Yeah.
day. I love the guy more and more
I do too.
every
I do
day,
too. Yeah.
right? And so then I'm just I'm just thinking that it's something to rally around, to,
Absolutely.
if not completely fix it, at least
Mhm.
address it and get closer, right? To finding remedies or more permanent remedies to what's going on, because I have hope that we can,
Absolutely.
turn this thing
And what
around.
does patriotism look like, right? Because what I
Yeah.
love about Tim Walz is he's your all-American guy, whatever that means,
Mhm.
right? And I
Mhm.
think the divisiveness was so real that you don't think someone like him would get it, but he clearly does. And I
Yeah.
think it's beautiful. He gets it. He's fair. He's a veteran. He served the country. He served in high schools because if you know these high school kids, that's that's service also, right? And
Mhm.
he's a coach. It's just but he gets the humanity of everybody and the respect that everybody deserves, and that it shouldn't be reserved for a few, right?
Mhm.
I think it was a post I think it was on Facebook. It said, if you believe in freedom but you don't care if everybody has it, then it's really privilege you're talking about, right? Because if
Yeah.
you truly believe in freedom, everybody should have it. And I think about it's very patriotic to continue to push us to be the country that we want to be, right? I
Mhm.
mean, I know in training and other things, I always talk about continuous improvement. It's the same with anything. And our
Mhm.
country can continuously improve. And
Mhm.
calling out our blind spots, to me, is love. We always talk about lead with love. If I'm leading with love, sometimes it's tough love. But to pretend that I don't see the big fat stinking elephant in the room is not love, because I need to call it out so we can figure out how to address it. And so
Mhm.
I just think it's a great time for opportunity, for equity, for acknowledgement, and for positive energy, right? Instead of the doom and gloom.
Yes, totally. But there's value also in remembering, right? Because we're all too quick to forget. It's like when you have that baby and you're like, oh hell no, I'm not doing that again. Right. And then what, 18 months go by and you're already planning baby number two, right? And you're like, oh, you
Right.
really quickly forget, right? And so I'm really grateful, right? That part of the narrative, it's like, wait a second, let's pause because this is not too far back, right?
Hello.
Okay, 2020, George Floyd
Right.
happened. just 4 years ago. You know what I'm saying? The
Absolutely.
pandemic just happened 4 years ago. The
Exactly.
putting the babies into cages and separating families, right? Like pulling the newborns from their mother's chests, right?
Yeah.
That happened just 4 years ago.
Hello.
Okay, we can go on and knowing that COVID was airborne.
Right.
Okay, you want to talk to me about Miss Kamala and whoever she convicted, whatever, and then they got out, whatever, because those are the ads that they're running now. Well,
Right.
I got to tell you something, buddy. Okay, if we're going to talk about criminal behavior and blood on your hands, what about the 600,000 people that died because you knew this thing was airborne in February of 2020 and didn't tell anybody?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, because I remember when that came out the year after, and it's recorded that he knew.
Right.
Okay, so I'm just saying.
I agree. I mean, that was
right. So I think Sonya Massey reminds us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that this is still the present. This is still happening. Okay, while we are joyous and we are hopeful, we cannot keep our eye off the ball, right? Like what the end goal is for people to experience equity, to be treated the same regardless of zip code, background, who they are, what they have, and who they love and who they know, right? You know, and that we can be free, right? That we're not under the thumb or like an oppressive system.
Absolutely.
You know, and so that's it. And all of those, even the what Venezuela's happening, right? It's like it tears me apart, right? To see my fellow Venezuelan brothers and sisters. What? But that could be us.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And so then again,
that's why we all have to stand up. Yeah, they came for the Indians, but I wasn't Indian. They came for the black people. I wasn't black. They came for Hispanics. And then they came for me and there was nobody. I mean, we have to stand up for right and humanity, regardless of who it is. We cannot pick and choose who's worthy of freedom and who's worthy of being treated human. No. We all are worthy, and we can't, oh, well, you don't know what they did. Stop. Everyone, you know, should have the ability to be loved, to feel secure in their home, right? To have opportunities for their children, for them to be whatever they want to be in life, right? Or to be mediocre and average, right?
Yeah. So by the time that when Chris's baby Hazel, right, she's grown, and I really have faith in this younger. They don't care. Like
they're better. They've learned. They pay attention to the mistakes we've made, and
what are these people?
How old is baby Hazel? How old is baby Hazel?
3 years old.
Oh,
yeah.
Going on 33.
Yeah. Okay. So it's this, right? This is the work, right? This is the heart work that we're doing now. So that way, you know, by the time she grows up, these conversations are moot. Like there's we'll be talking about.
They remember when it used to be, right?
Exactly.
So they move past it. Oh yeah.
Exactly. And that's the goal. I think that's the goal. And so, you know, so it's our turn, right? Like we need to go through this emotional whiplash, right? You know, and suffer through it, right? And
we don't have to, because if you think about it, what our ancestors went through, we're not going through, right? It's still horrific, but they're not turning dogs loose on us, right?
Yes.
We don't have separate water fountains. Nobody can just beat us in the street.
Yes.
You know, there are not the same lynchings. I mean, so, so we're standing on their shoulders, and we're trying to go through certain things so they don't have to, right?
Yeah.
So my granddaughters, you know, don't have to face the same level of emotional whiplash. Absolutely.
Yes, totally. My kids are teenagers, so they're still, but it's like your granddaughters, right? Your daughter, you know, and my grandchildren, hopefully, you know.
Yeah.
You know that by
get to the great grandchildren piece, but I know we're going to get there, right?
I mean, totally.
that we will. It's just
Yeah.
time, but it's also intentionality. There's a really
Mhm.
good video by Verna Myers, and she talks about kind of bias and priming. And she was saying how people say, well, that's just Grandpa Joe. He's like that.
Mhm.
But she's like, but we have to remember who else is in the room when Grandpa is saying these things.
Mhm.
It's the kids.
Mhm.
And if we don't start checking them and redirecting, it keeps being passed down. And that's what's
Yeah.
happened so far. Right.
Mhm.
So even though that may be how they grew up, we still have to challenge it because we have to let our children, our grandchildren see right from wrong, and that we don't just ignore bad behavior or ignore racist behavior or ignore homophobic behavior, behavior
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
misogynistic behavior. We have to stand up, and they have to see us standing up.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll just add, I mean, I think one of the biggest enemies of democracy is the complacency of people in the face of injustice who have the ability to do something about it.
Absolutely.
And I mean, again, I'll just go back to this. My hope is that this is a catalyst. I think when people's backs are against the wall is when
Yeah.
they have the most forward progress. When you lose a job, that's when you find it in you to find whatever resources to get yourself back up.
Absolutely.
When you want to go on a diet and all of a sudden you go to the doctor, they tell you, you know, fix it or you're going to be in a bad place. That's when people, jump on the diet. And I just look this up again. It's kind of just reminds me that an old Greek proverb that a society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they shall never sit in.
Wow.
And I think
Mhm.
that's just my call to the audience here. And you all said it best. Strip everything away, and it's humanity that is at question here, and morality. And again, we are seeing things happening internationally that are not so far off from being
Wow.
a reality here if we don't do something about it. And I think
Yeah.
it's these moments that give us kind of that fork in the road of
Mhm.
deciding who we are as individuals, as communities, as society, as a country,
Absolutely.
you have to be the change, I guess. As
Absolutely. No, it's
uh,
true. It's true. And use your privilege. I mean, the thing
right,
is, and I tell people all the time when I train, there's lots of privilege. It's not just white privilege. There's economic privilege. There's
Yeah.
educational privilege. There's all kinds of privilege.
Yeah.
When I teach a
Mhm.
class, I tell people the fact that you can still get paid your salary and be in this class 8 hours, that's privilege, right? Some people that punch a clock can't leave and still get paid, right? Some people
Mhm.
can't conduct business during the day. They have to wait till the weekends, and then all the lines. I mean, the key with privilege though is it's not bad, it's what you do with it, right? You
Yes.
got it. Nobody's trying to strip it, but how are you using it for good, right? I
Mhm.
mean, it is what it is. You got it. You didn't necessarily work for it, but it's bestowed upon you. What are you going to do with it? And I think if we start looking at what privilege do I have and how can I use my privilege for other people, that's kind of the mentoring piece, right? Who can I introduce this young person to? What can I do to open doors for them? Use it, right? I mean, we have it. So how are we using it to better the future for other people, right?
Absolutely. Listen, Dee, I'm so thankful that we made time to have this conversation because it's really important to all of us.
Absolutely.
Um, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, how can people reach you? Because you teach, you really are able to help with mindset shifts, right? And really equip people with these kind of resources and tools to better themselves, right? And
Yeah,
from
that's the goal, right? That's
yeah,
the
and
goal.
so what's the best way for people to
Sure.
get in
I
touch with
have
you?
a long, crazy email address, but Deloria Nelson at acesolutionsgroup.com, or you can Google my name of Deloria Nelson. You can find me on LinkedIn, Deloria Nelson-Streete. Send me a DM, but that's the goal, right? I think if everybody does the work, right? It's intentionality. Look in the mirror, do that introspection, right? We all have bias. So now that I know, what am I going to do about it, right? And how do I make the change or be the change that I want to see? We don't have time for bystanders, right? You just sitting there letting stuff happen. Get in the game and contribute your privilege, whatever it is. I mean, people that walk have privilege compared to people that are in a wheelchair, right? I mean, so we all have it. Figure out what it is and how do we use it to benefit the greater good, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dee, and hopefully,
Therapeutic, right? It's hard, but we got to get through it. So we got to do it.
totally,
And Chris, thank
absolutely,
you for jumping in and sharing perspective and just helping us to, we all have to care. And that's the thing. I mean,
Right.
caring is not segregated. Everybody that's a human should care about their fellow man. It doesn't matter. It's humanity, right? And you don't have to experience it to empathize.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is great. Thank you so much, Dee.
Thank you.
This concludes this episode of I Have Something to Say. Thank you for tuning in, and tell your friends to find us on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. And remember, if you have something to say, it's time to show up and speak up.